Welcome. Thank you for your interest in the Tennessee Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Deployment Plan. My name is Andrea Noel. I'm a Transportation Planning Supervisor for TDOT, the Tennessee Department of Transportation. I just want to point out that this is the recorded version of what we are providing at our in-person sessions. For today's agenda, we have several partners presenting. Next slide, please. I am joined by Mark Finley from TDEC, the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. Mark will provide a brief overview of the NEVI funding program. We'll then be joined by Alexa Wojtek, the Energy Programs Administrator for TDEC. Alexa will give you some basics on electric charging and talk about several current EV projects in Tennessee. Rachel Bergman is also a transportation planner with TDOT. Rachel will discuss the key considerations to be included in the plan and how we'll do that through our outreach process. Next slide, please. The NEVI program funding. So where did it come from? The Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, also known as EJA, also known as the bill, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, includes $7.5 billion for the NEVI formula program. The NEVI program provides dedicated funding to the states to deploy EV charging infrastructure. Tennessee's share of this is $88 million over a 5-year period. The bill also includes $2.5 billion in competitive funds, which will be divided equally between two grant programs, the Corridor Charging Grant Program and the Community Charging Grant Program. I'll turn it over to Mark now to talk more specifically about the NEVI funding opportunity.
Thank you very much. So one of the most important aspects of the NEVI formula program is that it's going to be initially directed to build out infrastructure along alternative fuel corridors for electric vehicles. These are corridors that are designated by the Federal Highway Administration and include largely the interstate highway system as well as a number of U.S. and state highways around the country. When this national network is fully built out, the funding may then be used on any public road or in other publicly accessible locations. And so next slide, please. And so here is a map of all of the FHWA designated alternative fuel corridors here in Tennessee. As you can see, this includes every mile of interstate throughout the state, as well as a large chunk of US Route 64 going along the southern portion of the state. So these are the corridors in which this NEVI formula funding may be utilized in this, initially until all of that infrastructure is built out. Next slide. And so there are a number of potential benefits that can come from NEVI investments in our state. First and foremost, it can improve clean transportation access through the locations of chargers along the alternative fuel corridors, allowing folks to get from point A to point B and reducing range anxiety for drivers. Secondly, it can decrease the transportation energy cost burden by enabling reliable access to affordable charging. It can reduce environmental exposures to transportation emissions, as EVs are no emission transportation technology. It can increase parity in clean energy technology access and adoption. It can increase access to low-cost capital to increase equitable adoption of more costly clean energy technologies like EVs and EV chargers. It can increase the clean energy job pipeline, job training, and enterprise creation in disadvantaged communities. It can increase energy resilience, provide charging infrastructure for transit and shared ride vehicles, increase equitable access to the electric grid, and finally, it can minimize gentrification-induced displacement resulting from new EV charging infrastructure. Next slide, please. And so here is an overview of the timeline as we know of it right now. In February, the Federal Highway Administration released guidance on the NEVI program. And next month, on May 13th, we are anticipating that FHWA will publish the full proposed regulations for minimum standards and requirements for the NEVI formula program. By August 1st of this year, each state must submit their state EV infrastructure deployment plan that describes how the state intends to use its apportioned NEVI formula program funds. This plan must be submitted to the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. And then by September 30th of this year, FHWA will approve eligible plans that have been submitted. And with that, we'll move on to the next slide, where Alexa Wojtek will begin talking about the background and current state of transportation electrification in Tennessee.
Thanks so much, Mark. Hi, everyone. This is Alexa Wojtek with TDOT's Office of Energy Programs. Next slide, please. So to give you a bit of background on the different power levels of charging types in Charging Station 101, Level 1 charging, or trickle charging as some people call it, is the type of charging where you plug into a regular 120 volt outlet. And this is the slowest type of charging, so it typically can take 12 plus hours. You get about 4 miles per hour in charging. This is the type of plug that you get with any electric vehicle. It comes with the vehicle that you purchase, and you can take it with you. It's mobile such that you can store it in your trunk. The next level of charging, or level 2 charging, is typically what you see at grocery stores, shopping malls type places, parking garages. And so this is where you would maybe charge or top off over lunch perhaps, and can get a full charge in 2 to 3 hours, or 20 to 30 miles of charge per hour that you charge. And the power level here is 240 volt charging. And typically you can have it in your home as well, but that needs to be installed by an electrician to have that dedicated level 2 charging. The third type of charging here, DC fast charging, or what some people refer to as level 3, this is the type of charging that we will be installing under the NEVI program along our designated corridors. And so this is the fastest type of charging and can charge your vehicle in 10 to 45 minutes approximately, or 150 to 500 plus miles per hour, depending on the specific power level of the charger. And so here we have dedicated 3-phase power, 480 volts, and you see it typically along those interstate corridors so that you can pull off the highway and get that top off. And just a quick note here that the charging stations that will be supported by the NEVI program, for each location we will have to install at least 4 DC fast chargers capable of charging 4 distinct electric vehicles at 150 kilowatts per plug. So it will have that higher power level to get you a quick charge. Next slide, please. Now in the fast charging, with fast charging, there are different plug types. And so we wanted to just spend a little bit of time touching on this. You can see here, these are the 3 main plug types that exist currently. CCS on the left, which stands for Combined Charging System. This is what is required by the NEVI program. So the NEVI program specifies that we have to have those 4 distinct chargers, and so we have to have at least 4 CCS ports. CCS is most electric vehicle models that are out there today or that are coming out in the near future use the CCS charging plug standard for DC fast charging. CHAdeMO, the one in the middle of the slide, this is the one that has historically been used by some Japanese automakers, for instance, such as Nissan. So the Nissan Leaf, for instance, uses the CHAdeMO port. So that's a second type of DC fast charging plug. And then the third on the right is the Tesla plug, which is a proprietary plug type specific to Tesla vehicles. Next slide, please. So here we have a snapshot of some of the impacts that the transportation electrification sector has had on Tennessee to date. We are seeing a lot of investment by automakers within the state of Tennessee in electric vehicle, battery, and related parts manufacturing. And so you can see here that we have 13% of the national electric vehicle manufacturing employment total within the state as of the end of 2021. And we can see here that 23% of manufacturing investment for EV and related parts manufacturing is in Tennessee as well. So big impacts from an economic development perspective. As of the end of 2021, we had a little over or close to 17,000 registered electric vehicles within the state, we do have a goal of driving that up to 200,000 electric vehicles in Tennessee by 2028. And so you can also see that we're seeing a growth in the deployment of chargers as well, 64% increase in 2021 alone. And obviously with the NEVI program, we will be adding to that and expanding public charger accessibility. Just a quick note that some of these stats are coming from the Atlas Public Policy EV Hub. So if you want to learn more, feel free to go check out that website. Next slide, please. And then here's another slide to just show the electric vehicle market share in terms of sales. And so you can see quarter over quarter how that's been growing in the past couple years. And we continue to see that drive up, particularly as new and more models of electric vehicles become commercially available. Next slide, please. So we wanted to spend a little bit of time sharing information on some of the initiatives that we've been engaged in to date that are leading us up to today and will help inform some of our planning under the NEVI program. So Drive Electric Tennessee, it's a multi-stakeholder initiative that really kickstarted back in 2018 to include state agencies like TDEC and TDOT, electric utilities, including the Tennessee Valley Authority, local governments, universities, electric vehicle manufacturers, businesses, and advocacy groups. We worked together to develop our shared vision for electric transportation in Tennessee, and we established this goal of driving the electric vehicle adoption from approximately 17,000 EVs in 2021 to that 200,000 electric vehicle goal by 2028. We also conducted a statewide electric vehicle charging infrastructure needs assessment in late 2019 to evaluate the condition of our current EV infrastructure and to identify what those charging needs and potential geographic locations would be to support that 200,000 electric vehicle population. The needs assessment really concluded that additional charging infrastructure was needed on highway corridors to relieve range anxiety and to connect our rural and urban areas. And highway corridor charging was identified as one of the best candidates for public or utility investment, whereas other EV charging use cases such as community charging, workplace charging, residential or multi-unit dwelling charging were identified as good candidates for private or public-private investment based on market attractiveness and anticipated utilization. Next slide, please. So another initiative that will complement the NEVI program is that of the Fast Charge Tennessee network. So back in early 2021, TDEC and TVA signed an agreement to collaborate and fund a statewide publicly accessible light-duty electric vehicle fast charging network along our interstates as well as select US and state highways. So here you can see the green corridors are the interstates, which correspond with our FHWA designated corridors where NEVI funds will go. But then also we've included as part of Fast Charge TN the select US and state highways shown here in blue. With the first round of funding released for application late last year, TDEC and TVA will be supplementing the existing public EV charging infrastructure to achieve what we're calling Fast 50 designation on these corridors, such that non-proprietary fast charging sites would be located no more than 50 miles apart along a given corridor or route. And so this Fast Charge Tennessee network seeks to add approximately 45 to 50 new charging locations along these prioritized corridors to triple our existing fast charging network. And for this program, TDEC is leveraging the Volkswagen Settlement Environmental Mitigation Trust funds, and then TVA is bringing additional funding to the table as well. So next slide, please. Also in 2021, we announced a partnership, TDEC announced a partnership with the electric vehicle automaker and automotive technology company Rivian to install their Rivian Waypoint Level 2 charging stations at all of our Tennessee state parks. So the goal is to have those charging stations available at all of the 56 state parks system-wide, depending on the availability of electricity and planned future park upgrades. And so this will be similarly a complement to the Fast Charge TN network fast charging infrastructure that we're installing, as well as the infrastructure that will be installed by NEVI, such that we'll be able to get across the state in an electric vehicle and can top off at various places. So next slide, please. And I think now I'm going to pass it off to Rachel to touch on our key considerations for Tennessee's NEVI plan.
Thanks, Alexa. Again, my name is Rachel Bergman, and I'm a senior planner with TDOT's Long Range Planning Division. The federal government has provided detailed guidance on considerations to be addressed within our NEVI plan. Some of the key components include discussion of how state agencies are coordinating together, discussion of public engagement and outreach, the plan, vision, and goals, an existing and future conditions analysis, how infrastructure will be deployed and implemented, civil rights, equity, labor, and workforce considerations, and how the program will be evaluated. I'm going to be discussing a few of these considerations in further detail. Next slide, please. All eligible projects that utilize NEVI funds must meet certain minimum standards. Earlier in the presentation, we discussed that funding for electric vehicle infrastructure is initially directed at designated alternative fuel corridors, which in Tennessee is primarily along our major interstates. Funds are not eligible to be used on any other roads until all of these corridors in the state are designated as fully built out by the Secretary of Transportation. Funds can be used along these corridors to construct new infrastructure and upgrade existing EV charging infrastructure. Fully built out includes several key criteria. Charging infrastructure must be located every 50 miles within 1 mile of the travel corridor. Each charging location must include at least 4 150 kilowatt direct current or DC fast chargers. These chargers can use a combined charging system or CCS ports, and they must be able to simultaneously charge at least 4 electric vehicles at 150 kilowatts. Next slide, please. Additionally, all plans must comply with the Justice 40 initiative. This is a federal initiative that establishes a goal that at least 40% of the benefits of federal investments in climate and clean energy infrastructure are distributed to disadvantaged communities. The image on the screen shows the National Electric Vehicle Charging Justice 40 map, specifically zooming in on Tennessee, which was developed to ensure that EV charging planning efforts align with these Justice 40 goals. The blue or purple areas of the map represent publicly available data from the Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation on disadvantaged communities and includes data sets on vulnerable populations, health concerns, transportation access and energy burden, and areas with environmental or climate hazards. We've also included some source links if you're interested in learning more about the EV Charging Justice 40 map or the guidance of how this is being implemented nationwide. Next slide. I'm now going to be sharing a little bit about our stakeholder and public outreach as being conducted as part of this plan. Related to the Justice 40 initiative discussed earlier, Tennessee's plan is being developed through engagement with rural, underserved, and disadvantaged communities to ensure that these diverse views are considered throughout the planning process. Our plan will reflect our commitment to EV charging infrastructure that is equitable and fair. This is reflected in both our in-person and virtual outreach sessions and survey questions that are specifically addressing disadvantaged communities. TDEC is currently in the process of conducting stakeholder and public outreach to support the development of the plan, and we welcome feedback from any of you listening, as well as at the public outreach sessions we will be holding across the state. One way that we are collecting feedback is through the development of a survey that is now available on our website. We hope that you will take the time to respond to the survey to support plan development by May 31st, and so that we may use your feedback in plan development. In addition, TDOT and TDEC are hosting 8 in-person listening sessions across the state. We'll be sharing much of the similar information we have shared today, as well as inviting attendees to share feedback and answer questions on the NEVI plan. Next slide. If you are interested in joining us in any of our listening sessions, the map of those areas are located on the screen. We look forward to seeing you in Kingston, Kingsport, Knoxville, Nashville, Monteagle, Chattanooga, Memphis, and Fayetteville this May. Next slide. I'm now going to be turning it back over to Andrea to close us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Now that we've given you an overview of the NEVI funding program, some background information, and examples of current projects, we also talked about the different methods we're using to gather feedback for the plan. You might wonder what happens next. All of the feedback that we collect until May 31st will be incorporated into the draft plan. The TDOT commissioner reviews the plan, and after it's approved, TDEC and TDOT will submit the final plan to the US DOT on or before the August 1st deadline. Once the plan has federal approval, TDEC and TDOT will release specific guidance on how the program will be implemented. Next slide, please. If you have any questions that were not answered here today on the web or on the website, feel free to reach out to Alexa or Matt with additional questions, comments, or any other feedback. We hope you have the chance to join us at one of our in-person sessions, but either way, please make sure you take the survey by clicking the link on the website at tn.gov/EVplan. Thank you.